I will run this race.
Matt and I first talked about adoption during our premarital counseling. There was something about it that appealed to me. I admit it was much more of a romantic, rose-colored glasses view of rescuing an orphan than a true understanding of the gospel, or a true understanding of the way adding orphans to a family mirrors God's work on the cross, or a true obedience to God's call to care for widows and orphans.
During the first few years of our marriage, God quickly added 3 biological children to our family. Our hands were full, but the desire to adopt grew and grew. In the summer of 2010, we pursued a domestic U.S. infant adoption and were devastated when it failed. We temporarily quit the adoption journey. We still deeply desired to add to our family through adoption, but emotionally we needed time to recover.
Little did we know that in those early weeks of questioning God's will and wondering if He had a child for us, a baby boy was born in Hunan, China. 19 months later, he would join our family forever. By the summer of 2011, we were ready to re-enter the adoption process. I spent hours getting all our documentation in order for a China special needs adoption. In August, our home study was complete and we were waiting on some approvals from the U.S. government. We also discovered we were, very surprisingly, expecting another baby. While we seemed farther and farther from my idea of the perfect way to build our family, we were confident God never lost course. This was exactly what He had in mind. So while we waited for paperwork approvals, the baby in my womb and the orphan who would become our son grew and grew. In January, 7 months after beginning the China Special Needs adoption process, we saw John Paul's face for the very first time.
John Paul's story is a mixture of grief and joy, abandonment and rescue, despair and hope. Born with cleft lip and palate, John Paul was abandoned when he was 2 days old. He spent 1 night in the orphanage, and then, at 3 days old, we saw the earliest glimpses of God's grace. Probably because his cleft made it difficult for him to drink from a bottle, his orphanage director sent him to a foster family. We're so thankful that John Paul spent his first 19 months safe in the arms of a precious lady who loved him deeply instead of spending hours in a crib, largely unattended by the overworked staff of an orphanage. After accepting John Paul's referral, we had more waiting, mostly for approvals from the Chinese and American governments. During that wait, Luke arrived. And in August 2012, 13 months after beginning the process, Laura and I flew to Zhengzhou, China to get John Paul and bring him home.
My heart beats faster just looking back at these photos. I had no idea how deeply John Paul's arrival would rock my world. I had no idea how hard it would be to graft him into our family. I had no idea how weak I would be, yet how much strength God delighted to give when I stepped out in weakness. I had no idea how desperately I needed Jesus. We brought John Paul home and watched his personality emerge. The quiet shell of a little boy who scarcely made a peep for the first few days turned into a toddler with a larger-than-life personality. But it wasn't all easy. In fact, it was very, very hard. I didn't know him, and he didn't know me. All of our hearts needed time to figure out what to do with our new family reality.
We're often asked by neighbors why we adopted when we already had 4 children. The simple answer is, God gave us this child. We believe all life is valuable, created in the image of God. We believe that each and every child, each and every orphan was fearfully and wonderfully made by the Lord of heaven and earth. We believe that children belong in families, that children are blessed to be raised in homes where they see and hear the gospel daily. We believe that Christians are called to care for orphans in their distress, and we believe that God delights to take stories of grief and despair and turn them into stories of hope and life. And ultimately, we rejoice that God gets glory when His power is perfected in our weakness.
If adoption was easy, it would make people look good. Adoption is hard, and our prayer is that our adoption journey would make God look great. My heart still aches for the orphan. I cannot imagine life without John Paul. Fighting for this little guy, his heart, his health, his future, is one of the greatest privileges of my life. And when I think of the thousands of John Pauls in orphanages and foster homes across China, in America, around the world, I pray that God would call families to join us in this journey and bring these precious children home.
I can't wait to see your face.